What's up, MetaNerdz? This video will break down the rare Secutor-class Star Destroyer, seeing its intended role during the Clone Wars, how it was used by Tarkin's rival, and went on to serve the reborn Emperor. But first I want to thank Established Titles for sponsoring this video, and making me a true lord. My Isles ancestors are surely looking on with pride, especially since Established Titles works as a fun way to preserve the natural woodlands of Edelston, Scotland, and restoration efforts all around the world, planting a tree with every order. How it works is that you purchase a title pack for at least 1 square foot of dedicated land, coming with a unique plot number, and works through a Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies in English, and so you can use your new title on credit cards, plane tickets, or throw it on your dating profile. You get this neat plaque which even has your own crest, and it makes for a great last-minute gift, while keeping these wild areas from being industrialized, and helping global charities like One Tree Planted and Trees of the Future, which honestly is more than a lot of other lords and ladies can brag about. The first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot, so we can establish our own little MetaNerdz kingdom. And to make it even better, Established Titles is running a massive Black Friday sale right now, and if you use code MetaNerdz, you get another 10% off on top of that. Go to establishedtitles.com/MetaNerdz to get your gifts now and help support the channel. The Secutor class was designed by Kuat Drive Yards during the Clone Wars, and was intended to replace the Venator, with the Venator itself being designed at a time when the Clone Wars was still a secret. But once the clone was out of the lab and the galaxy was engulfed in war, Republic military brass would get involved in the process on Kuat, with their engineers learning from battle reports, captured CIS ships, and stolen intel on Separatist craft and tactics. The question we should ask is if the Secutor succeeded in its role. Did it check off all the boxes to make it better than the Venator for war with its particular enemy? A question that was asked by a lot of tax-paying citizens and Republic senators fighting against the increased military budget. Because to start, the cost was nearly 4 times the Venator, 200 million versus 59, and was about half the cost of the supersized Providence variants like the Invincible. The overall length was about twice its predecessor at 2.2 kilometers, or 1.36 miles, making it 1.3 times the later Imperial Star Destroyer. With a Class 2 hyperdrive, it was tied with the ISD, but slower than the Venator when traveling through hyperspace, which may point to the Republic feeling that the difference in response time for these capital ships wasn't as necessary as they thought it would be, with Republic footholds spread throughout every rim and even in hut space. Or it simply wasn't possible on this larger, more power-hungry ship. And since you can see with the Acclimator here being the smallest and fastest, and they were still able to put a Class 1 in the Victory, but you lose all that in the larger Imperial craft. We do see that the Venator's role as a star cruiser with an emphasis on starfighter complement was something the Republic was trying to keep. The standardized ranking system called the Anaxis War College system gave it another designator, the Battlecruiser, because of this size. But it still had a focus on starfighters with these 2 large ventral hangars, and a much greater complement with curious changes to the firepower, with 15 heavy turbolasers, 15 light turbolasers, 15 battleship ion cannon batteries, 6 medium ion cannons, and 12 tractor beam projectors. This is nearly double the heavy turbolasers, which were more designed for overloading the shields of capital ships and performing orbital bombardments of cities. It drops the odd medium dual turbolaser cannons for a good distribution of light turbolasers for enemy transports, frigates, and corvettes. But the most shocking is the loss of anti-starfighter weaponry, having none of the point defense laser cannons, which were crucial for keeping off swarms of vulture droids and hyena bomber runs. While the Secutor also drops the proton torpedoes. These were usually perfect for ripping through vessels once you took down their shields, and since you could fire a variety of specialized torpedoes, you had all sorts of options from flak-like explosions to deep-penetrating bunker busters that were useful everywhere from planetary caves to space stations and asteroids. Since the CIS's military philosophy was to field overwhelming numbers of droids, B-1s on the ground or clouds of starfighters blocking out the stars, everyone knew a Republic vessel had to account for this, which leads me to believe that Darth Sidious was guiding the development of this ship, ensuring that he had a new line ready to go after the threat shifted from droid army to policing your own populations. As this armament was ideal for destroying cities, taking out the odd capital ship that some rebel might steal, or some planetary defense force might be able to turn against him, and with so much focus on ion cannons, it's like what we see with the ISD and other Imperial ships. I mentioned that they want to capture these rebels alive, and use their massive suite of novel and highly effective torture methods. That way you're not just taking out a crew in a single ship, but you might get the intel needed to destroy the entire rebel cell. And I believe you see this same role with the complement, because though it tried to focus on starfighters, the Venator had about 3 times the starfighters of the Secutor. So again, we see that this newer ship was expected to fight less enemy fighters, but still did have a relatively high number, about twice the ISD. so it was still a carrier for the Empire, but not what you would expect during the Clone Wars. At this time, the Empire was the one with the swarms of fighters. Now the 144 TIEs that would come screeching out of the Secutor were there to prevent the escape of rebels trying to flee via shuttles or escape pods. And same goes for the scum trying to squirt out of a hidden base, or even potentially sympathetic citizens trying to escape an Imperial lockdown after rebel activity was detected. None of this ship's details point to it being intended to be a better Venator, but a ship for a different enemy altogether. But since this would have been obvious to anyone involved in its design, I think it's a nice look at how people like Tarkin and Palpatine would get involved in military matters like this. Likely under vague references to top secret intel, or they could just claim that the CIS was about to change their tactics, and most likely of all, no one dared to question the directives coming down from the top. Same goes for the Allegiance class, which was about the same size but with no complement, and aimed at pure destruction, deployed to space stations or paired with larger fleets, where ion stun options and starfighters could be provided by other craft. When that rebel base or troublesome city was detected, we see the aspects of the Secutor that made it more like the Acclamator. Most obvious was the overall shape, which was this more pronounced triangle, but still with the Venator-style double bridge. And unlike any other ship, the towers were moved to be in a more central position. The Acclamator was perhaps the greatest planetary invasion vessel ever produced, with an incredible amount of troops, vehicles, and cargo capacity for war materiel. It is unknown how many vehicles were on board the Secutor, but AT-AT walkers are listed, and likely smaller variants like the ST and DP, with 14,000 clones and later stormtroopers. The ISD also saw a much greater troop complement than the Venator, pointing to another Imperial theme that was the insane jump in crew requirements. 40,000 in the Secutor, 37,000 in the ISD, compared to 700 in the Acclamator and 7,400 in the Venator. It's that tactic of pulling as many citizens onto the Imperial side as possible, and then using those stormtroopers to fill up a city and strike fear into the population. It didn't matter if they were less trained than the clones. Like droids, the sheer number of them could prove deadly, and seeing the shiny white bucket heads everywhere you went helped to make rebellion seem more futile. Of course, having all these crew members sitting around knowing they were doing busy work to make up for the fact that the ship could run on about a quarter of the men did help to breed laziness and complacency, which sometimes helped to prevent rebellion, but would sometimes backfire and give ambitious and persistent rebels an opening, making most imps cowardly, easy to bribe, and even would push some to be drawn to the Rebel Alliance's pitch that they could engage in a fight that would give their lives meaning. At the start, I said to keep in mind that this was pitched to be the replacement of the Venator, and to ask if it achieved this. In a dark way, no matter what you think of its role as a capital ship, it did fit its role better than the Venator. There's no doubt about it, simply by being 4 times the price, fulfilling the true purpose of the Clone Wars, and therefore the true purpose behind every piece of equipment, ship, vehicle, and clone. To take a republic that had no military at all, and turn it into a culture that was willing to give up its rights out of fear, funnel credits to Palpatine's loyalists in building this military industrialized complex that would work to provide government jobs to the citizens of this future empire, growing the fighting force with the promise of stable jobs and stable star systems, and tying as many citizens' paychecks and quality of life directly back to the Emperor and the crony corporations, cutting down on any chances that they would side with a crazy rebel force trying to shake it all up just for some ideal. The first time the Secutor saw service was in the earliest days of the Empire, at a time before the ISD replaced the Venator. The details of this particular skirmish shown are murky, but do point to it being used against Separatist remnant forces right after Order 66 and the deactivation of the droid army. What's more is that this Quasar carrier was designed for the Empire by Sorosub, but one may have been taken by the Separatist or early rebel forces. By 14 BBY, 5 years into the Empire, it may have been on his Secutor-class named Conquest that the Navy Intelligence Agency's Vice Admiral Dodd Rancet came up with a very dangerous gamble at adding blocks to his chest. Rancet was growing resentful watching his career stagnate and the Emperor's old chum Tarkin rise through the ranks. He used the NIA's intel to coordinate the growth of Birch Teller's rebel cell, which was perhaps the largest cell of this time, with certainly the most powerful ship, commanding a Frankenstein Providence-class dreadnought. With Rancet's leaks, Teller would be able to get away with a string of attacks that grew to be far more than just frustrating. And to make Tarkin specifically look foolish and impotent, Rancet helped the Teller gang steal the Carrion Spike, Tarkin's pride and joy, and the only Corvette like it, with state-of-the-art cloaking technology, and even the name was special, with the Carrion Spike being the place where Tarkin was formed from a scared little boy to a fighting man. Losing this ship was devastating, as rumors of this failure threatened to make Tarkin the laughingstock of the Moffs. As personal as this loss was to Tarkin, it was also a high enough level threat to the Emperor that Darth Vader was assigned to help Moff end this rebel cell. They did eventually realize Rancet was playing both sides, and by this time, the second stage of Rancet's plan was in effect. He was about to betray his rebel friends and become an Imperial hero, telling Birch Teller that the path was clear for an epic strike on Karaida, home to the most prominent Imperial Academy and surrounded by an important shipyard and space station. the repaired and improved descendant of Valor Station from the Clone Wars. Teller was once a Republic intelligence officer, and he sensed the trap. Since he knew that holding on to the carrion spike for too long was never really plausible, it was just too hot and hard to maintain. He took a page from the old CIS playbook, sending it on a collision course with Karida. It would pop out of hyperspace and come barreling towards the world, and Rancid was at the bridge of his Secutor, the lead ship of the Karida flotilla, and ready to let the Conquest save the day, ordering the crew to open fire, only to be cut off by Darth Vader. What was supposed to be the Emperor's personal boogeyman acting as witness to Rancid's victory, ensuring his rise in rank and toppling of Tarkin, quickly turned into the ominous cyborg reading out his death sentence. Vader ordered the crew to scan the carrion spike for life forms, and seeing that it was empty, and already having the communications that he was expecting its arrival, Vader was certain that he had the traitor. And since Teller thought he was being played and sent it empty, it made Rancid look like he had no aims at actually killing off the rebel cell, just that he was going to help them fake their death. For this, the Vice Admiral was escorted to an escape pod and fired away from his flagship. Every crew member from his own Secutor to the flotilla, space station, and maybe even some young cadets down below, all watched as Vader made a powerful display of what becomes of traitors, no matter how high-ranking they were, ordering the Secutor to open fire and turn Rancid into space dust. A spectacle that was sure to spread throughout the entire Empire, and likely every cadet that passed through here would hear the tale of how the sharp-minded Tarkin and horrifying Dark Lord would root out any foe, be they Sep, Rebel, or fellow Imp. Over the following years of the Galactic Civil War, the Secutor would continue its service, but never in the numbers that we see with the Victory, Imperial-class, or Super Star Destroyer class. Some were at Naval Station Valaducia, while others are known to be called in to snuff out Rebel outposts, not being with their own fleets securing solar systems, but attached to other battle groups when the mission saw fit, likely when those ion cannons and troop numbers were needed. What is very interesting is that despite how rare they were, by 10 ABY, 6 years after Endor, a Secutor was seen as part of the fleet that protected the deep core world Biss, the secret location of Emperor Palpatine's resurrection program, and Luke would pass by this fleet on his way to confront the resurrected Emperor. So that's it for its breakdown. As for behind the scenes facts, the ship actually started off as a fan-made ship by Ansel Asio, based on a background ship seen in the Dark Empire 2 comics from 1992. Ansel said he likes the design because it reminds him of the B-2 Flying Wing, and it became canon when approached by Lucas Licensing for use in the Essential Guide to Warfare. It was later used in the Age of Rebellion sourcebook, and then became a major part of the story in the Canon Tarkin novel, with more details coming from Ships of the Empire and Rebellion in 2021. Truly one of the most interesting behind-the-scenes arcs for any ship. And in Latin, Secutor means pursuer or gladiator with sword or shield. So that's it for the Secutor-class Star Destroyer. The best way to help me out is to hit that like button, leave a comment on what you thought or future suggestions, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you can, become a member. But most important of all, remember, unless you're the son of the Chosen One, never bet against Tarkin, and the Force will be with you, always.